came to the monastery to write. After years of publishing philosophical tracts, teaching at universities, and relentlessly chasing answers to questions that never ended, I felt hollowed out, exhausted, not by the body, but by thought itself. So I fled. I chose Romania because it was far, quiet, and old, very old. The monastery of St. Demetrius lay like a forgotten fossil among the Carpathians, where mist poured over the rocks like milk down old stone. It wasn't on the map. A local woman, wrinkled and nearly blind, pointed me up the mountain with a shaking finger, whispering, "You will not return." I laughed then. The monastery welcomed me in silence. It had no electricity, only lanterns. The monks, all pale and thin as reeds, moved slowly, gliding rather than walking. They never spoke unless spoken to, and even then their words came out like sighs, as if sound itself were an inconvenience. Brother Ion was assigned to me. He was young, but looked centuries old. His eyes were ringed with violet shadows, and his skin had the color of old parchment. He led me to a tiny stone room, my cell, with a cot, a table, and a single window looking into a courtyard where nothing ever moved. I set up my typewriter and told myself this silence would help me write. It didn't. The days were long and identical. No clocks, no bells, no clear meals. The monks ate in silence, their food bland and gray. Lentils, gruel, sometimes boiled roots. I stopped knowing which day was which. My watch died on the third morning. My body refused to wake or sleep on schedule. I tried to write, I truly did, but my fingers would hover over the keys and no words would come, not even nonsense. One morning I asked Brother Ion, "How do you keep time here?" He smiled faintly. "We no longer need time. Time needs us." That night I dreamed I was buried alive under parchment pages. When I screamed, the paper filled my mouth, soft and endless. My body slowed. I had never known such heaviness. Not tiredness, but slowness. My limbs felt like wet cloth. I moved like I was underwater. My thoughts came in drips, and even blinking seemed to take effort. I told myself it was the altitude, the food, the silence, but deep inside I knew. This wasn't fatigue. It was rot. The mind begins to die long before the body. It does so quietly, politely. It tells you that tomorrow you'll begin again. That rest is deserved. That stillness is peace. I stopped writing altogether. Just stared out the window for hours, watching mist curl around the stones. Brother Ion would occasionally visit. He never asked if I was well. Instead, he would sit beside me, both of us silent, unmoving, like statues awaiting erosion. One evening I found a hallway I hadn't seen before. Curved, descending. I followed it. The air grew colder and sweeter, like the smell of rain on stone. At the bottom, an arched wooden door. Carved into it were the words, "Rest is the truest worship." Inside was a library. Endless, quiet, unread. Shelves reached to ceilings lost in shadow. Books in languages I couldn't recognize. I touched a spine and felt a jolt, as though the book had exhaled. I opened it, empty pages. Another, blank, hundreds of them. I turned, and a monk I had never seen stood in the aisle. His face was covered by a dark veil. "Do you wish to join the silent order?" he asked. "I'm just here to rest," I replied. He nodded. "That is how it begins." I began sleeping more. 12 hours, then 15, then entire days. Sleep came like water, filling every crack, drowning every urgency. I would wake only to feel a yearning to close my eyes again. I lost track of how long I'd been there. Months perhaps, or weeks. My beard grew wild. My body thinned. I stopped eating on some days, forgetting entirely. Other days I gorged on their tasteless stew like a dying man. My hands trembled when I tried to write. But writing, why? What had I even come here to say? Brother Ion said to me once, as we sat on a moss-covered bench, "You are forgetting the illusion of purpose. It is painful at first, but soon it becomes gentle." I didn't respond. I didn't want to. Then came the dreams. They were no longer dreams, they were visits. Each night I would find myself standing in the library again. But now the books bled ink. It dripped down the shelves, staining the floor. I walked barefoot over black rivers. Voices whispered from the spines. Do nothing. Be still. Rest is truth. Once I opened a book and found my own face on the page, mouth open, eyes closed, as if asleep. Each morning I awoke more tired than before. Each morning I remembered less of who I was. One day I didn't wake. Or at least I thought I didn't. I rose from my bed and looked in the mirror. I had no reflection. Brother Ion came to my door, but he did not see me. He cleaned my room slowly, reverently, folded my blankets, burned a small bundle of herbs, and whispered, "May his sleep be pure." Then he left. I tried to speak. My voice did not work. I tried to move objects, scream, write. Nothing answered. I was in the monastery, and I was not. I was in a between space, a limbo of endless observation where I saw others slowly fall the way I had. Travelers, artists, seekers. They came with purpose and left without names. The monks walked among them, gentle guides toward oblivion. I do not know how long I have been here now. Time does not flow. I watch the mist. I sit in the library. I read blank pages. Sometimes I think I feel the pull of the world beyond. Memories of coffee, noise, arguments, love. They fade quickly. There is no pain here, no fear. But there is decay, the soft rot of meaning, the spiritual entropy of the soul. Not torn apart, but dissolved. Sloth is not laziness. Sloth is the still death, the kind that does not scream but sighs. Yesterday, if such a thing exists, I saw a new visitor. She was young, maybe 20. A violinist, I think, judging by the case she carried. She walked quickly, eyes bright, feet determined. I followed her, whispered things she couldn't hear, watched her fingers tremble, watched her hunger slow. She sat down to play in the courtyard. At first the sound was sharp, beautiful, then slower still. Now she sits with me in the library, eyes half closed, bow resting in her lap. Another sleeper, another whisper in the monastery of eternal stillness. If you are reading this, you are not safe. This place exists in more than space. It is a concept, a sin, a spiritual sedative. It calls to the tired, the burned out, the thinkers and feelers who can no longer move. And when you stop moving, it feeds. Beware the promise of peace. Beware any silence that numbs rather than heals. For it is in such stillness that the soul is eaten. I no longer remember my name. But once I came here to write, and now I rest forever.